On this week's podcast, we sit down with the president of BrandPoint Services, Steve Hearon. Steve has 30 years of entrepreneurial experience and shares with us some of his key learnings and systems he has put in place to maximize the performance of himself and his business. Enjoy the episode. Steve, you have certain characteristics that are really, really strong, right? You're a competitor, you fight hard for things, you love growing businesses. But what do you enjoy most about being an entrepreneur? Let's start there.
I've been giving that a lot of thought, knowing that we were going to have that conversation. There are many cliches out there that you can apply, but I went all the way back, even just this morning, thinking about it, going, how do I not sound like every other person they're going to talk to in this type of conversation? And say, well, the freedom can be a curse because you're free from one thing, but you're never free from your business that you own, or I don't want to say never, but it could take a while to get your business that you own to a point where you're truly free. It's a labor of love being a true, business owner. But I go all the way back to, I remember sitting in a college class at Bucknell, middle of central Pennsylvania, trying to figure out how I was going to pay my tuition for the following year after going through, now I'm into the spring and I'm realizing the reality of the loans I've taken and the cash I've got to come up with. And I just come off a summer of painting houses during the day for one of my fraternity brothers at College Pro and tending bar at night and still not being able to make even close to the amount of money that I needed to make. But when I understood the business model at College Pro and had signed up for it, I realized, okay, basically for every painter that's working, I make this much an hour of their time, not of my time, of their time. And so my time's finite, but the number of them I can hire is infinite. And so let me just back into this number. How many painters do I need to have out there working to make the money I need to make this summer? And once that light bulb clicked for me, that's when I realized me painting houses or me pouring drinks or me physically being I'm the limiting factor in that world, and that I'll never realize my own goals, my own dreams. But if I can stay, kind of put myself in a position to scale, leverage my time, keep my time focused on the things that I'm good at, and in that at that time it was selling, go out and market and sell a bunch of paint jobs. And then I could scale the painters. That was a revelation. That changed everything for me, and it made it very difficult to go back from there once you get that, right? It's very hard to then ever put yourself back in a position where you're holding a paintbrush, painting, going, how many hours can I put in to make the money I want to make?
Steve, early on as an entrepreneur where you saw, I only have 24 hours in a day. However, I can, to your words, scale kind of with other people's time. And they can make money and I can make money from some of their effort too. Yeah. How do you keep consistency with a brand or a service as you look to scale that with other people who are not the owners anymore?
Yeah, is that the entrepreneur's dilemma. I know many people from back in our College Pro days. A couple of them my best friends. I have some of my best friends that continued the journey to College Pro, my brother included, continued the journey through the College Pro ranks, scaling big businesses. Some of them left and became painters, professional painters, and never hired an employee. But we're very happy. They had their own business. They were entrepreneurs, but they never realized their financial dreams. I think always were a bit frustrated on the financial rewards of the business for them, but they were not willing to let go of the quality component. Is that what you're driving at, Rich? That willingness to install systems that enable the quality to be scaled. Is that?
Yeah. What are some of the systems that, in your experience, either whether it be with College Pro or throughout your 30-year career, what are some of the patterns that you've noticed about how you've been able to install systems to keep consistency? Because, part of the entrepreneur's dilemma is it said nobody cares as much as the guy that owns a business, right? So as you look to scale with other people's times, what are some of the systems that you've used to equip consistency despite the fact that maybe they don't care as much as you do?
So here's one of the things, Rich, that I've learned in my ripe old age now, because I fully believe that. I had mentors tell me they will never care as much as you. They're not you. I'll tell you what, especially in the past decade, I've surrounded myself with people that do care as much as I do. I mean, I've been amazed by the passion that some of the people that are on my teams bring, and how much they care. To where there have been times I've been sitting with another human being across from me in tears, physically sick, shaken up because they care so much. To where I've had to say, "Wow, like." Relax. We're not saving lives here. This is not. Nobody's going to die tomorrow because of decisions we're going to make today. Let's take a step back and have some perspective. Take a few breaths. But I guess my point is, you can find people that care.
So what
because
do
of their
you
own
do
pride.
to unlock that? Outside of like, hey, here's somebody who just cares. Like, what do you do as an entrepreneurial leader to unlock that caring?
So I think it's having a vision and selling that vision, and that's really something that I can give John a lot of credit for, because John, in our 20s, when we ran off into the handyman online world, that all started with a vision, and that really was, okay, vision, then strategy, and now we'll have our tactics, and we'll get the blocking and tackling done. But starting with a vision that you believe in yourself, cannot be artificial. It can't be disingenuous. It's really got to be vision you believe in. It's got to be logic behind it. It has to hold water, from my experience in the business world. And then selling the heck out of that vision to people that you believe in. And once those people buy in, then there has to be trial and error. I think the thing that sets me apart, probably some other entrepreneurs, while I've been able to grow, is I am not afraid to make mistakes. Some people just aren't willing to make a mistake. It has to be perfect. I'm not willing to let a customer down. Listen, I have let many customers down, but I have always made it right. There's never a customer that I've ever turned my back on and said, that's a quality you're just going to have to accept. I've walked up and accepted it and said, we had a quality issue here. What do I need to do to make it right? And some of those customers I still do business with today in other ways, because they respected that I owned the mistake. It's that willing to own the mistake, willing to correct it, learn from it, and then say, all right, how do we not ever repeat this again? If we're repeating those same mistakes, you're going to fail. And so there's a bit of surround yourself with a great team that buys into your vision. Be willing to try things, be willing to make mistakes, but get those mistakes corrected, and then get those better practices circulated. Right? The facilitation of best practices, so that when you see something's working, systematize it. And that's something, Charlie Chase, who we all know, really has been brilliant at throughout his career, and something I've tried to emulate.
You'd mentioned people buying in. It said in order for people to buy in, they have to weigh in. They have to be able to share their opinion, to be able to, and you don't have to go with their opinion, but they have to be heard. They have to weigh in order to buy in. At what point in that, the threesome you mentioned was vision, strategy, tactics. At what point in there, if you picture that almost like as a pyramid, right? Vision at the top, then strategy, and then tactics. Where do you have your people weigh in on? Do they weigh in on the vision, or is that something that you exclusively decide on and communicate? Do they weigh in on strategy? Do they weigh in on tactics? How does that work in your experience?
I don't think there's one stock answer. I think it's situational. When I'll speak to BrandPoint, when I joined BrandPoint in 2012, it was off the ground, and there had been a vision for it, and it was going in a certain direction. And I had the luxury of being given the opportunity to restart. Kind of say, hey, no sacred cows. Go in here, take what you think's working well, make it work more. Take what you think's not working well, make any changes. And because I was new to the commercial space, I had very limited commercial experience. I was a residential guy. Most of my career was a B2C guy. So I had some things I felt I was bringing to the table in terms of leadership and in terms of business practices, but the B2B world was new to me. So in that case, I really circled the wagons with the folks that were there, did a lot of due diligence on who was there and who's opinions I was going to probably give louder voice to. But I really wanted to hear from everybody. What's working here? What's not? And where should we take this thing? And then through that, I formulated, okay, I see it. It's clicked for me now. I've heard a lot of voices. It's clicked. Here's what I see. Bounce that vision off of those I trust the most. And then open it up and kind of say, hey, here's where we're going. What do you think? Took that feedback and making sure they understood, listen, just because you have a voice doesn't mean you have a vote. You get a voice in this and you get to influence my opinion here, but ultimately I'm going to make a decision and go. And then probably a little longer than it should have taken me. If I look back, I took about 14 months to just go, boom, that's it. We're going this way now. What we're doing is not working. And that would be advice I could give to that Steve, is I could say, Steve, what took you 14 months should have taken 6. You dragged your feet on some things. You avoided some pain that didn't get any less painful because you avoided it. Example was I closed down our office in Toronto. That was the legacy office. And I took, at the time, and I took over in Philadelphia, was commuting, was trying to find a way to make that work, even though I knew in my heart of hearts it wasn't going to work. And that office could have been closed quicker and we could have moved quicker towards the new direction we were heading. But at the end of the day, I guess I erred on the side of hearing a lot of voices, gathering a lot of information, to then lock in my vision and then go. Now, once I had the vision and had that initial buy-in from the close-knit management group, we really then focused on sell that vision, and then we'll take a lot of our input at the systems and tactical, at the strategy and tactical level. And even the strategy probably was pretty closely bound to the vision. We had a vision, we had a good idea of strategy. The tactical was a great place to get everybody's input on and get people to feel like they were part of the program.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, you talk about decisions, right? And sometimes we take, as an entrepreneur, too long to make decisions, sometimes too short of a time to make decisions. Sometimes, we make good decisions. Sometimes we make bad decisions, right? And certainly I know you've made a lot of decisions in your career, right? What are some decisions when you reflect upon and think, back to use a different example here than the one you just used, but what give me an example of maybe one decision you've made in the past that if an entrepreneur was listening to this podcast, or like, don't make that mistake as an entrepreneur, what would that be?
Oh, wow. Well, I wish I could say there was just one, John.
Exactly.
But I think due diligence is important, right? A lot of entrepreneurs, we trust our gut, and we do tend to make decisions quickly. We don't always act on them, but in our mind, we kind of made a decision. And I've learned over the years, especially again in the past decade, that due diligence is very important. You really do need to understand what the data is telling you, and don't manipulate the data to give you the answer that you want. You have to be willing to look at the data and say, the data's arguing against what I thought in my gut was the right thing. And so that's probably, something I've learned in terms of my decision-making process. Do your due diligence, number one. Number two, absentee businesses are tough. Probably part of why what the three of us are, kind of talking about here with regards to, that who's going to care as much as you do. If you don't care enough to be a part of it, or you're not like really into the day-to-day. I've had businesses that have failed. Yes, I admit it right here, right now. I have not succeeded in every single one of my entrepreneurial ventures. I think back to a plowing business that I was in many years ago. And I try to do it as an absentee owner or a part-time owner, right? I'm here Saturday, but then I'm not here until a month from now. Now I'm back. And I found that my presence as owner was more disruptive than productive. It was one of those that's you either have to accept it as a passive investment and that there is a management team installed and they're doing, and they got to have skin in the game and they're running the thing. But if your management team has no skin in the game and you are only dropping in and out, my experience has been that's tough. That's tough to make that work. You're not going to get ultimately what you want. But if it's a passive investment, you got the right management team and they have skin in the game, it could be a very nice situation where you're consulting. I mean, in a perfect world, I want 10 of those businesses, or even 20. But to try to just have a business off to the side that you've just got friends running, and you're the only one with skin in the game, and you're popping in and out, it's going to make for some difficult going.
Yeah, and especially when you talked about it earlier, if you want your team to care, they need to know you care, right? Yes. And that's one of the traits I'd say with you. Like, you're a very high energy entrepreneur, right? No one works harder than Steve in any given day, right? In terms of your effort level, and you lead by example in the business, and I know people see what you got going on, right? In terms of activity and level of excitement and energy around the business, and they want to match that as much as possible, and they'll match that caring. But if you're absent, you're not there, you're not present, then how can you expect your team to care, right? Equally.
And then from a culture standpoint, I think, John, is what you're speaking to as well. That's something that has really been a focus of mine, is trying to facilitate a culture that people want to be a part of and feel like they're part of something that's not just the job, clocking the clock, in and out. What time is it? I got to leave. And I'll go all the way back to College Pro again. When I knew College Pro was for me as the owner, was when I had spent a day driving around all day, and it was 4:30 in the afternoon, and I just looked at my watch. It was like, where did this – wow, I accomplished 17 things that I wanted to accomplish, and some of them may have ran late or been a little sloppy, but I accomplished all this stuff, and it's 4:30, and I still have a bunch more to do, and I don't care. I want to do it. I'm not slowing down. And it was that boredom is a career killer. If you are bored, you're dead in the water where you are. You need another challenge. You need to do something else. And so I've always tried to avoid boredom at all costs. Entrepreneurship can typically get you there.
That's very true.
Steve, you have mentioned culture. I feel like that's one of those things that a lot of entrepreneurs look at, and they may use the word, and it's a bit of a buzzword. It's sexy, right? We want to have a good culture around here. Like, what does culture mean to you, and how do you develop a successful, winning culture?
And it's a big one, because to me, people will work for less money, even maybe not a lot less money, but for less money even in a good culture, from my experience, than they will. They might jump at the job initially for the paycheck, but if they move jobs for a little bit more money, and they land in a place that does not have a culture that they're comfortable in, they'll come back. They'll absolutely regret the decision, and they will come back, and they will take less money to come back. Culture is that thing that's so hard to quantify, but requires work from the top, where you say every day, the way I started looking at it when I had full control of the culture of my business, you don't always have it depending on your role. But if you've got control of it, it's waking up every day and saying, why do people want to work here? Why do people want to work here? We do everything from unclogging toilets here to, complete reconstruction of facilities, complete refresh of facilities, or, complete fit outs. Or we're installing sneeze guards tens of thousands at a time. It's not the sexiest business. I don't think it's what gets people fired up in the morning. Maybe some, don't get me wrong. And for those, I'm very grateful for those people that are fired up about that. But I think for most, it's about my teammates. My teammates need me today. I've got to show up and not let them down. My clients need me today. I got to show up and not let them down. That purpose of, hey, we have a goal. The team all set a goal together. We're all pushing for the goal. And man, when we hit that goal, we're going to have a big party, and we're going to celebrate that goal. It's going to feel great. Those are the things that you're going to get the longer work day out of, right? You're going to get the engaged productivity out of. And so I think it starts with little things, going, where can we as a team strengthen our bonds? How can we increase trust? And that might mean we're doing things outside of the office back when that was a possibility. It's more challenging than ever these days, and it's not impossible. But, when I talk about, what I've done historically, all right, let's catch a ball game. Let's grab a cocktail. Let's go bowling. Let's just go hang out, take a walk, or let's go for a run, or let's play basketball, or Where can we find common interests to make us realize that we're all human beings too outside of this day-to-day grind? How do we get to know each other and what motivates each other and ourselves? How can we make the competition more fun? And then once you've got that, it goes back to this vision of we're all rowing in that direction and we all win if we get there together. So, man, everybody talks about culture. Everybody talks about culture, but who really delivers on it? I mean, it has to be a full commitment. There has to be a full commitment to making the workplace something more meaningful than just the nuts and bolts of what you're doing.
You know, you'd said three things. It just made me think of an exercise maybe entrepreneurs who are listening to this might be able to do in their business. You said teammates, clients, and goal. And no matter what the vision is, no matter what the product or service is, I think those are three things that probably could be leaned on that I pulled from what you said is maybe doing an exercise with people in the business on what do you want for or from your teammates? What do you want for your clients? And how do you contribute towards the goals around here? And if in an exercise with people in the business who are answering those and sharing their answers, like that in and of itself develops culture, is having clarity on the three things you mentioned.
Well, and as you're restating that, Rich, and thanks for kind of helping organize my thoughts. One of the things culturally I'd say that's worked here is letting people's personalities shine. You know, as long as again, I guess it goes back to hiring the right people is very important. Hiring the right people is important. We really try to have a no jerks rule. That no matter how qualified somebody is, they could be the most qualified person you've ever met, but if they're a jerk, take a pass. Take a pass. A cancer in your business, can be really, really harmful. So if you focus on bringing in, high quality people that want to be part of a culture, that you're talking about culture in the interview process, in the onboarding process. Once they're on board, I feel like it's the leader's responsibility to bring them out of their shell, especially if they might be a little reserved. Bring them out of their shell, put them in situations where they're interacting with their teammates and getting to know their teammates, and they're getting to shine, speaking publicly about what they're doing, sharing a lot of their personal story, their personal history. That's what that facilitation is about. The more you know about your teammates, what motivates them, what they care about, the more those bonds will be there, the more you'll have each other's back, the more you'll root for each other. And so I really think that teammates is a big, 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 big piece of it. And then the teammates work together to service the clients. And our clients, I really believe, feel the culture of the BrandPoint team. I really believe that if you ask a lot of our great clients, they would say, wow, the BrandPoint culture is something we love being a part of. We love the energy they bring. We love the passion they bring, and that's where that all comes together.
You mentioned the no jerks rule at the hiring point, and I feel like there are a lot of entrepreneurs that have a difficult decision to make between, do I keep this person who's not really a culture fit, but they're a high producer, they're a performer, they're making money for the business. Can you think of a time in your experience where you had to make a difficult decision to protect culture? Where it was like, I don't want to do that. Feels like in the short term, maybe the business loses, but this is the best thing for the culture, and culture's number one. Is there a time where you had to make a tough call like that?
There have been so many of those. And that is advice I would absolutely give entrepreneurs. Mavericks, I guess, as we would call those folks. There are mavericks that you will have in your business that will crank numbers, and the numbers will look really impressive. But and you'll enjoy the profits in the short term, but it's those, will the long-term profits be there, and the damage being done in the trail of customers left frustrated, in the trail of other teammates left frustrated. Don't get me wrong, I've been there and done that. I've kept the maverick in my business longer than I should have. I have a shorter tolerance for it as I get older. In this last decade, where you try to start putting together the things you've learned over time, I've been more and more able to pick out a maverick. And again, if I see that there's a maverick in the business that's alienating others, sometimes the best jolt of positive energy you can give your company is to part ways with that maverick and show everyone that, number one, you're not afraid of or beholden to that person. And number two, you're really the one in charge. And number three, that ethical following of our business model is the approach that we want to take, that we're not just going to grab the dollar because somebody's cutting corners to get there. So specific examples, I don't know that I want to call people out.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And I think one of the things you're bringing up too, though, Steve, is, you are the type of entrepreneur that isn't afraid of addressing conflict. And you can't win, if you use a sports analogy, you can't win championships with bad customers, bad vendors, or bad teammates. Even if the customer is giving you lots of business, if they're a bad customer in other senses of the word, right, you're not going to win your championships. But one of the things I want to come back to here is the concept of conflict. You're certainly not somebody who shies away from conflict. If there's a conflict, you know how to address those in a pretty professional and efficient manner. What are some of the traits there that have helped develop that skill set in you over the years?
I think it was always the fear of it getting worse if it festered. I just, that experience early on, knowing that if I don't get to this and address it, it's going to fester, it's going to get worse, it's going to come out in weird ways down the line, that I won't like. And number one, but number two, also the experience of learning that sometimes a conflict's the best possible thing that can happen in a relationship, where you really get to know each other's boundaries. You get to know what makes each other tick in a good and a bad way. And wow, I mean, I can honestly tell you in the conflicts that I've had over the years, whether it's clients, teammates, fellow partners, the conflict has always led us to a step closer in the relationship, if it was handled the right way by all parties. Don't get me wrong, I've had conflicts that weren't handled properly and have led to the souring of relationships. But boy, I work hard not to let that happen. I really do. I welcome conflict, and maybe it's not the sense of the word traditionally that people think conflict. Oh, no, it's an opportunity to share my feelings and to listen to somebody else's feelings and find out why they're not syncing up. And so, at least if I'm sharing honestly, I'm giving that person every opportunity to at least know where they stand, know where I stand, and know how I perceive the situation. And if I'm really listening then back to them, I don't see a lose out of those types of conversations. I want those conversations happening all day long. But we know human nature is, for many people, they're difficult conversations to have. Some people are just afraid to share their own feelings because they don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings.
Yeah.
And they're willing to listen, but then maybe not comment back. And so I think as an entrepreneur, I can't recommend highly enough that conflict is a good thing. It's a good thing in business. It's about how you handle it. Share where you stand. Be honest where you stand. Be direct with people. Don't make them guess. And then listen. I have to remind myself still every day, I got to listen more. I got to listen better. I got to sit down and listen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I think as you look through even this past COVID crisis or current COVID crisis we're dealing with now, entrepreneurs or businesses that can address conflict can, thrive through this if they can figure out, the right pathway for them and their customers and their vendors and their employees and everything else. But if you don't address conflict, you just let it build up, or you don't make the decisions quick enough, conversations quick enough, those kinds of things. So, if you go, switching gears here just a little bit, we talked about some of the lessons you've learned and if you had to share with them, people listening on this call, what are some things you've learned in the past? What is one thing as an entrepreneur you'd say is a must do? As an entrepreneur, here's something that, you really want to be doing with your team, with yourself, with your business in order to achieve success.
Well, I'll speak for myself and just say I need a plan. I'm a map guy. Even, going back to our college pro days of having the maps that were like this and flip all the pages, look in the grid. But if I don't have a map, I feel disoriented. I feel like I'm fumbling. I don't know if I'm going off too far to the right or too far to the left. I really feel like I have to sit down, knuckle bust the keyboard a little bit, get some ideas on paper. It usually starts on a whiteboard, makes its way to my keyboard, a lot of sketching in between, but I've got to have a plan, right? I've got a vision where I want to go, but I at least have a skeleton plan to get there, and then we can refine and refine and refine. But I take planning very seriously, as I know both of you do, to the extent that even in very mature businesses, I'm going to have a 5-year plan. I'm going to have a 3-year check in on it. And then I'm going to have a very detailed 1-year plan. And then that 1-year plan will break into quarters. And then those quarters will break into months, which will break into weeks. And to me, it's the only way I know if I'm on track. If I've got that plan set, then now I know this week we got to get this accomplished. And if we don't, I'm off the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm off the plan, and I need to redo the plan and get back on the plan. And that's probably the single biggest tool that I use to just at all times know I'm succeeding or I'm failing. And if I'm failing, I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to know that they're failing. So if I just work harder and keep sprinting in that direction, I'm going to eventually succeed. Don't get me wrong, you might get lucky and succeed just through sheer hard work. But my experience has been I have to know on a week-to-week basis if I'm on track or if I'm not, or else, you close your eyes and blink and 90 days went by and you just burned $10,000 in cash that you needed, right? So,
Steve, what do you say to the person, like when we talk about planning, there's a whole subset of people that go, listen, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to leave it all on the field, and I'm going to end up where I end up. Like, I don't know why I need a plan in order to go do everything I possibly can. The plan's not going to equip me to do more. Like, I'm going to go try my hardest. Why do I need a plan?
Yeah, and I've met many folks like that. Many folks, especially in franchising. My Amco days, I had 700 franchisees. CertaPro days, hundreds of franchisees. College Pro, hundreds of franchisees. We've seen that. And again, there are plenty of people that have had some degree of success. But the question is, whose degree of success? How do they define success? How do you even know? What did you win? You left it all out on the field in order to win, I assume. Did you? How can you quantify the win? And so I feel like deep down, the folks that take that approach don't want to glue themselves to a goal because they don't want to be ever told they're not winning. Right? They figure if I give you a goal, you're going to hold me accountable. I don't like that. So you just take my word for it. I'm going to work really hard all the time, and I'm not going to, And accountability is a big thing, especially, entrepreneurship. You have a partner whether you like it or not. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you either have a spouse that's a partner whether you like it or not. You have a bank that's a partner whether you like it or not. You have a key stakeholder in the business that's maybe your operations manager. You have partners. And those partners, you have to be accountable to them, or they're not going to trust you as a partner. Like if you want a reputation in your career as someone to be counted on to deliver, you have to quantify what that means. And if we can't quantify and agree on the success equals this, then you can keep running around and leaving it all in the field, and that's great, but no one's ever going to know whether you're winning or losing. I guess maybe you will deep in your own heart, but I think by not being willing to share it, just like, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds. Everybody would love to lose 10 pounds and be a little trimmer, a little more fit, I'm sure. But if you don't say it out loud.
So I want to go just one level deeper real quick to the entrepreneur that's listening that goes, yeah, I am the guy who just goes and does everything he does. I haven't had a plan. What would be a starting point? Like, what are 3 to 5 components of a plan that every entrepreneur should have?
Well, bottom line, top line, I think you need to understand from a bottom line standpoint where your business has to be to survive, to keep going, be healthy, be ready for growth if that's your goal. Then you need to know what the top line associated with that bottom line is that you've got to drive to. And then you have to know what the key milestones are, right? So I've been fortunate to work in businesses that have some history to them. And even when I stepped into BrandPoint, even though I knew I was going to make a lot of changes, I wanted to know, last 5 years, Where do we have to be by Memorial Day in landed business and completed business? Where do we have to be by 4th of July? And where do we have to be by Labor Day? What does the history say? What does the data say? The data doesn't often lie. What does the data say where at least you know alarm bells are ringing if you're not on track with that? So I typically, in my plan, I want to know historically, where do I need to be by certain key dates in my plan? I need to know how the top and bottom line connect and what my margins, enable me to be. And then I need to know what my other key levers are. 6 closing rate, right? Big lever in the business. Slippage might be a big lever in the business. I need to know, what are those key levers that I can pull if I am running behind and I know, wow, it's just a low lead year. Well, I better get a higher close rate than, where do I have to be able to adjust on the fly? And maybe that's the biggest thing I could say about it, Rich. By putting that plan in place and saying, I really want to make $8 million this year. This is my year. I'm going to make $8 million. Okay. To make $8 million, I got to sell $100 million of widgets. Okay. Well, how am I going to sell 100 million? Well, history says if I want to sell 100 million, I better have 50% of them by the 4th of July, and then that forces me at those key milestones to step back and go mid-course correct. What's going right? Oh, success ratio is great. That's awesome. Getting a lot of leads. What's going wrong? Oh, our client reviews are terrible. We're not getting any referral. It forces that step back, course correct, to, in my mind, give you the best opportunity then to hit your plan by the end of whatever the time period is that you're chasing.
Yeah. Steve, obviously through the years, a lot of education, a lot of, I'm sure, mentorship and learnings. Talk to us about maybe some of the business mentors you've had or how you've kept that saw very sharp, right? You have a lot of learnings through the years you've implemented in your businesses. Where does that all come from?
I'll tell you what, some of the loneliest years I've ever had were when I wasn't reaching out to my mentors. I have found that every executive or business owner needs a mentor or a coach or somebody that you're checking in with that can be honest with you, that's not afraid of getting fired tomorrow, so they don't want to tell you the full truth, that they can just be honest with you and say, here's what Steve, these are the words that came out of your mouth. Let me just feed it back to you and tell you what it tells, and just be able to have that kind of conversation where everyone's guard is down and we can be really honest. And so I keep in touch with a lot of my mentors over the years and really desire to continue to. John, were you looking for me to name names here?
Not necessarily, but I'm sure you've had a lot of influences and books you've read or things you've done to keep that entrepreneurial saw nice and sharp.
Right. So let me get to the books. The books thing's big. I'm a pretty avid reader, and I try to. It annoys people around me that travel with me because I've got like a Kindle here and a book here, and I got a newsletter here, and they're like, "Why don't you just read one thing?" But I bore easily, so I try to. At all times, I'm live in a fiction book, and I'm a big history guy, so historical fiction or something interesting about history. I'm in a non-business related book. I'm always in a business-related book, and then I'm always in a kind of a health improvement, whether it's mental or physical. I want to have, at all times, one of those three going, so that if I get bored with one, I'm grabbing the other, and then a lot of times it's interesting to see how they connect the dots along the way. But I'm a pretty avid reader, and the book that changed my life the most was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. That's the book that inspired me to quit my job at Amco Transmissions and come work for you, John, for the first time in Handyman Online. It's the book I read that made me feel like I'm not achieving my potential. I must achieve my potential. That book just rocked my world.
Yeah.
So 1,000 pages, but if you haven't read Atlas Shrugged, you need to read it if you're an entrepreneur or desire to be an entrepreneur. It lays out capitalism as clearly as it can be laid out. And it's a fascinating book written by a woman in her second language, in the early part of the 20th century. Just incredible, and it stands up today. So can't say enough about Atlas Shrugged. In terms of other books, pure business, E-Myth Revisited is a great one for somebody that's never been an entrepreneur looking to start their own business. And The Millionaire Mind is a really good one, because I think it helps people start to understand the difference between what my paycheck says every week and how I feel about that, or the car I'm driving, or the kind of scoreboard I'm keeping, as opposed to true wealth creation and wealth building. Those 3 books would be a great place to start. Atlas Shrugged will take you like months to read, so but E-Myth you can buzz through, Millionaire Mind you can buzz through.
Well, the first time you told me about that book, a little bit ago, I researched it. There is a Cliff Note version. So for anybody listening out there that can't read 1,000 pages like myself, there is the Cliff Note version if you want to look into that first before you commit to the 1,000 pages.
I've read it 3 times. I'll read it again. Every couple of years I need to dive back into it, because it just reminds you, if you're not out there, crushing it, if you're not out there kicking ass, that book will make you want to go out and kick some ass.
Love it. Well, I love kicking ass, that. So that's good. And the one thing that you were talking about too, and it kind of falls to capitalism a little bit. It's a little bit off subject because obviously you're the president and one of the owners of BrandPoint Services, but also recently we've had some conversations about why people should also have their own LLCs as businesses, and it goes back to that millionaire mind thinking of how an LLC can really help you, because we live in a gig economy now. Everybody has different projects that they do and work on. But talk to me about your experience in setting up your LLC, and what some of the things that's unleashed for you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, John. My brother said it to me 15 years ago. You really should have an LLC. You need to do this. Yeah. And then it was really you that really hit me in the face with again a couple years ago, a year and change ago, and said, Steve, no, for real. I have one, not just telling you to do something I think you should do. I'm telling you to do what I'm doing because it just makes sense. Certainly opened my eyes, or reminded me that capitalism is all about business ownership, and small business ownership fuels our economy. And so as a result, one of the reasons our economy has worked so well, and it'll be really interesting to see some of the fallout of COVID-19 and the impact on small business, but the U.S. government wants you to have a small business. The U.S. government has aligned the rules to set you up to succeed in a small business. You just have to get yourself familiar with what the rules are and take advantage of it. So setting up an LLC for true self-starters, you can do it by yourself online. For me, I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of friends out there. I had a lawyer that was working on some other stuff for me anyway. And so it was just easy for me to just go, hey, while you're doing that, you mind getting an LLC created for me and blah, blah, blah. I mean, and again, even having a lawyer do it, it was turned around in like a week, maybe 10 days, and it was not costly. If you do it yourself, probably less than a couple $100. If you do it with a lawyer, probably $500, maybe a little more than that. I mean, again, it's nothing to start an LLC. And that's when you start then realizing, wow, American tax law was designed to be in favor for the small business owner, to give the small business owner every opportunity to be successful. Because if that small business owner is successful, they're going to employ people. And if they grow, they're going to employ lots of people. And that's what makes our economy work. And so, yeah, just being able to look at things through that lens and realize that, all the people that I consult for out there that I've historically just, not really organized that and structured it in any kind of way, it made me take another look at that. Obviously, some investment property, real estate that I have out there. There are lots of things that you can kind of tuck under there. And then once you start looking at it in that lens, a whole other world opens up to you where you realize, how you can leverage your time, your money, and obviously do it in the most tax advantageous way. So I hope that's kind of what you were looking for there, John.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Steve, this was great. We appreciate you coming on with us today and talking to all the entrepreneurs out there. As far as we're concerned, if more entrepreneurs kind of share their lessons learned and some of their successes and what they've learned over the years, we can all be stronger for it. And I've learned a couple of things today that I jotted down that I think were really good as well. And I think there's some really good concepts that were put out there today. So I really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on with us.
It was a pleasure. A lot of fun. It flew by. Thank you so much for inviting me.